Brynhawn da, good afternoon my ffrindiau, brynhawn pawb. Welcome to Influencing and Informing Engaged Change Question Time. I haven't turned up as Fiona Bruce today, but I'm sorry if you're disappointed. But I thought I'd be professional for the change, likewise that's not going to happen. This event today is an opportunity for you, the audience, to ask questions to our political panel this afternoon. My name is Geraint Jones-Griffiths. I am the lead ambassador for Influencing and Informing Engaged Change, and I am your chair for this afternoon. And I hope you get good answers to your questions from our panel today. Good afternoon, Jane. The event today will be live streamed. If you don't wish to appear on any video or photograph footage, then please let a member of Learning Disability Wales and Engaged Change know. Before we begin, you should be given a set of headphones. Yeah? Nod? Yeah? No? Yeah? Cool. What you have to do is open them up, and there's a dial in the middle. You turn it to your right, and it turns it up. Turn it to your left, turns it down. I would like, first of all, on our panel, we have a representative from each of the main political parties this afternoon. Thank you all for coming. Each of whom has helped support Engaged Change in some sort of capacity, and we are very grateful for all of your dedicated support, time, effort, and resources. First of all, I would like to welcome Mark Isherwood, MS. I've known Mark for quite some years. Mark is a Shadow Minister for Finance and Chief Whip. He also...
Well, he's been promoted.
He also chaired the cross-party groups, which when I became across with Mark all them years ago. Mark is also a pioneer for fuel poverty and energy efficiency, autism, disability, neurological conditions, funerals and bereavement. So thank you, Mark. Next, we have Jane Dodds, member of the Senedd. Jane represents the Liberal Democrats and is a member of the Senedd Equality and Social Justice Committee. A few weeks ago, myself and some colleagues from Engaged Change delivered oral evidence to the committee inquiry into disability and employment, and fair enough, we answered some questions from Jane as well, which is really nice of your input. Thank you, Jane. Next, we have a really good friend of mine personally, Sianed Williams, a member of the Senedd. Sianed is a member for Plaid Cymru. Sianed is also a member of the Senedd Equality and Social Justice Committee, who listened to our evidence at the Disability and Employment Inquiry and asked questions from us. Diolch, Sianed. And of course, how could I forget Hefin David, member of the Senedd. Hefin represents Welsh Labour. Back in July 2023, Hefin wrote a report called Transition to Employment, and fair enough, some of the recommendations Hefin highlighted came from Influencing and Informing Engaged Change, and he mentions us in the report. So diolch, Hefin. Right, without further ado, our first question comes from Stacey Traylor, and Curtis Marshall is going to ask Stacey's question on her behalf.
Hi, I'm Curtis. I'm the first trustee, and this is from Stacey Traylor. So she says, imagine if you had a learning disability. What support do you think you would need, find, and keep? Thank you.
Diolch, Curtis. Can I start with Hefin for this question initially?
I asked you if we were to start with, and you didn't tell me. Can you hear me? Oh, it's not working. Can you hear me without the microphone? Yeah. So, first of all, I want to say one thing before I get into the question, right? You've probably seen Question Time, and you've seen politicians having bites out of each other, and, you know, Liberal Democrats saying they're all as bad as each other, and Conservatives, you know. It's not going to be like that today. Don't be disappointed. Because I've said publicly on Sharp End TV that Sianed and Mark, and Jane as well, they're champions for the things we care about. Mm. And if we're going to achieve things for our young people, we've got to work together. And I'm really pleased to say that Sianed, Mark and Jane are as passionate about this subject as I am. And they are doing that work, and we are working together. This session today was set up in with our agreement, wasn't it? You know, we probably might have a policy disagreement, but this isn't about electioneering. This is about finding how we can get a pathway through to help people. The other thing I want to declare an interest, my daughter Caitlin is autistic, and she's got severe learning disabilities. She's 9 years old, and everything that I've seen, the pathways that people are on, my daughter is treading that path. She was diagnosed at the age of 3. She's not quite non-verbal, but uses echolalia and phrases for communication. So I've seen this, I'm living this as much as you guys in this room are living this. I'm living the path and I'm living the life, and it's massively challenging. So where my report came from, which Geraint mentions, transition to employment, imagine if you had a learning disability. Well, I don't really need to imagine because I'm seeing it every day. What support do you think you would need to find and keep paid work? So I'm going to go straight to the recommendation in my report. Recommendation 8. I'm going to read it out if that's okay. This is what I said. Just find it. I asked Alex if we'd had a paper copy so I could give some help, but we've given them all away. But if you type in Heaven David report, you'll find it on Google. The Welsh Government should review support for job coaching for those transitional learners with additional learning needs who request it. With reference to the good practice developed by Engage to Change and Learning Disability Wales, an ALN job coaching strategy should be prepared, expanding the provision of specialist coaches to support learners with ALN to gain paid employment. Now, Angela Kendron and I had a conversation, and we said we'd love to see a national job coaching service for everyone. Money's tight, but I really do believe there's an opportunity to build on the work of Engage to Change, Learning Disability Wales, to have a proper job coaching network. I'm not giving up that fight. I asked the question in committee last week, and the civil servant who was there didn't seem to know anything about it. But I know there are civil servants, because Angela's told me there are civil servants working on this strategy. If we want to do something, we've got to be coaching our young people who are matched to jobs, their skills and abilities matched to jobs, coaching them through those early days. I could have done with it when I was starting out, because I didn't have a clue. I was sacked from Cardiff Council for not being very good. Job coaching is really important, and I'd really like to see that. So that's my response to that one.
Good heaven. Sianed?
Yes, I mean, I'd agree, and this is something that we've discussed actually, is the need for a strategy around job coaching, because we know at the moment that things are patchy, and they are ad hoc, they're not the same in every part of Wales. Just coming back to that first thing in the question, which I think is a really important part of the question, imagine if you had a learning disability. And for those of us who perhaps are those employers who perhaps haven't got that personal experience and haven't perhaps had the training that they should have had, we know that the understanding by employers of what people with learning disabilities can achieve and what they can contribute and how they can, more importantly, develop, that they're not stuck in roles, because this is something that we hear an awful lot about. I think that is something that we need to tackle as well as that practical support for people who are trying to gain that employment or stay in that employment or develop within that employment. The other thing I'd say about that is about earlier engagement. So something we heard in the committee was about aspiration raising. So too often in schools and from a very young age, people with learning disability are told, or autism are told, you can't do this, this isn't for you. And the people who are perhaps coming into schools to talk about opportunities in the world of work and in education are not tailor-making their presentations to those people. They're not opening the doors to those people. And we even heard terribly distressing evidence where people had been left behind in a classroom. Because, you know, the rest of the class had been taken off to do some work experience and they'd been left behind. So I think there's a job of work definitely as regards practical support and having a strategy around that from government, but it also is about creating an awareness with employers and an empathy and an understanding, and also making that engagement within, you know, to get to people at an earlier age possible as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Sianed. Mark?
Thank you, and I agree with all the comments we've heard. If I'm not loud enough, let me know and I'll use the microphone. This whole world opened up for me 25 years ago when we were fighting to get one of my children a statement who had learning differences and speech and language problems, and it was a horrible battle with authorities that were determined they knew better than we knew as parents. Fortunately, we won with the help of our head teacher, and it's one of the reasons I came into politics, as I realised how difficult it was for people faced with situations like that. And we met, because of this, and the unit my son then went into, a language unit, many other families who had fought similar battles, most of whose children turned out to be on the autism spectrum, and or to have learning disability or learning differences. As chair of the cross-party autism group, which I've been privileged to do now for 14 years, I think, we regularly hear, and I regularly also get private constituent casework from people who are being blamed, bullied, discriminated against by often very senior people in public roles, but also in private companies, who don't understand the need to take the time to build trust, get to know what that individual's communication, sensory, processing, social needs might be, and adapting them to those with the individual, so that that person can then access the employment process, can apply for a job and not be faced with necessarily the traditional interview or the traditional exam or test, but be faced with a selection process that identifies the skills they do have, so that the employer can actually access those skills and benefit from them. And once in employment, and we hear about things like the Disability Confident Employers Scheme, and a few weeks ago I was presenting awards in Wrexham to some disabled people who had gone through the programme successfully, and some of the employers who had successfully employed them. But the problem we have is the employers who don't do what those employers were doing, not only enabling them to get the job in the first place, but then working with them constantly once they're in the job through, you've got coaching. Coaching can mean many different things. For some people, it means formal training. Proper coaching is performance management with people, not telling them, but asking them, how's it going? What's working well? What difficulties are you having? What barriers are you having? And how can we help you remove those barriers? I'll finish with a perfect example. There's a friend of mine in North Wales. He's probably in his 30s now. He worked for a charity in North Wales. He's autistic, and he became an inspirational speaker talking about his experience. And the employer he then worked for was called North East Wales Carers Information Service, NewKIS. And they took the time through his performance discussions to always check how things were. And if at times his environment was getting cluttered, he gave an example when people come back from holiday and after the summer and they put up postcards and mementos, and sometimes it made him feel uncomfortable. So they would arrange to move his desk or ask people to move pictures around or whatever, so that didn't happen. And they had an agreement that if he was feeling particularly anxious, he could just leave his desk, go down to his car, drive a particular route that he loved, and then come back to his desk, because for him it worked. That got him to the place he needed to be. Other people have different ways of getting to the place they need to be. And that was accepted by the employer. Because of that, he thrived. He contributed massively to the organisation, and he ended up being headhunted to go and work in actually care homes, providing similar support there. So I'll stop at that point.
Thank you, Mark. And lastly, Jane, last point from you on this
Well,
question.
thank you very much to Stacey and diolch yn fawr iawn i Curtis for asking the question. I think three things really quickly. The first thing I would do is listen. So I would want to be heard if I was somebody who had that particular issue. I would want to be listening as an employer, as somebody who potentially is looking at that person as having real potential. And this is where I think we heard on the committee, actually. I would want to say to all employers, it's not particularly different or special. It really isn't. It's like any normal recruitment, if that's the way you want to use it. So I would say, let's listen, let's really be active in that. The second thing is, it's about a culture change. It's about changing the whole of the culture we have in our society and the whole of the culture there is in the workplace, which is the person is there as an individual, just as we are. We've all got different needs, we've all got different experiences. Let's focus on that person. And the third thing is, it's about social change. And I think part of that is about language. You know, my challenge to you is Learning Disability Wales. Well, let's flip that on its head. We're the ones as a society who are actually in a position where we are needing to learn and needing to be really adjusting ourselves. It isn't people with disabilities. So let's say it's about looking at your abilities, everybody's abilities, whoever they are. So those are the three things, and I would concur with everything that's been said by my really fabulous colleagues, and I know there are others across the other political parties. We want to work together on this. There is no difference here between what we all want to do in order to really promote this. So thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Second question will be asked in Gymraeg. Just to say as well, the microphone isn't for the audience, it's for the live streaming.
Sorry.
That's okay. I'm just telling you now so you don't forget. Question 2 will be asked in Cymraeg and it's by Maisie Jones.
One of the amazing ones already on the boiling contract with the Neither body one tower soul double awkward body power traveler the version they get one power. And there are school work of salt there. Spare mine, one thing and one outright the dot walking graphic. Maybe Canon in your coffee at work. Side careers roles in Barber, Bonado, one day 120 shard on color. With a different metal on Garden Scobion, like a lady, healthy bowl, with that gold being far away, also going hot, sorry. Our prepared comploring.
Diolch. Thank you, Maisie. Can I start with Jane on this question, please?
Sorry.
Wel, diolch yn fawr iawn i chi, Maisie, am gofyn y cwestiwn. Diolch am eich... dych chi wedi bod yn gwych. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Cwestiwn pwysig iawn. Felly, i fi, be mae Sioned wedi dweud, hynny ydy, mae'n bwysig i'r ysgolion dechrau yn gynnar iawn i rhoi y cefnogaeth. Mae hynny'n bwysig iawn. A wedyn, fel oedden ni'n dweud, mae'n bwysig hefyd bod ni'n trio cefnogi y pobl sydd eisiau rhoi cyfle i bobl fel chi, a bobl ifanc fel chi. Dwi eisiau gweld hefyd bod yna mwy arian yn mynd i fewn i gwasanaethau i cefnogi pobl sy'n ifanc. Da ni wedi gweld, mae'n anffodus, da ni wedi gweld gwasanaethau cael eu cymryd i ffwrdd. A mae rhaid i ni sicrhau bod mwy o arian yn mynd yn ôl i cefnogi pobl ifanc. Felly diolch yn fawr iawn i chi.
Diolch. Thank you, Jane. Mark, please. Diolch.
Diolch. Dwi'n deall Cymraeg tipyn bach, so I'll answer in English if you don't mind. It's very much like my first answer. I get a lot of casework, and we've had actually people speaking at the cross-party autism group about their experience and those of their children, very similar to your own. And some schools, I believe and understand, do it a lot better than some other schools. And it tends to be the families of the children where they're doing it badly who come to the likes of us when it's not going right. And too often they come to the likes of us, and certainly my casework, when it's gone horribly wrong. And the pupil, the student, has got into difficulty sometimes when they couldn't conceal their anxiety, or they've ended up being excluded rather than helped. We come back to the basics of teacher training, and these days the training within the teaching courses abound disability generally, and learning disability and particular conditions or spectrum like autism is not as strong as it needs to be. Again, when I was a new member 22 years ago, we did a review of all this, and we learned that the days when there were specialist courses for trainee teachers to specialise in what we used to call special educational needs, it's now additional learning needs, no longer existed. And the schools that had people who had that training were worried because most of those teachers were now in their 50s and they were going to be retiring soon. And the other teachers went to them for expert support and advice when pupils they were working with needed that support and advice. The answer proposed at the time was, well, we'll send a teacher in the school on a training course and they will, there's a funny word, cascade what they learn to everyone else. Well, that's not good enough, and it's letting down the teaching staff and the pupils. So there's a big issue here about how we train and support the teachers to understand better how they need to support pupils who have different training, learning needs, perhaps different again, communication, sensory processing needs, so that they can enable those students to achieve whatever way they wish to. So in essence, that's what I would support.
Okay, diolch. Thank you, Mark. I'm just going to quickly, I would ideally like to move on to question 3, because we are really tight for time. If that's okay with Heaven and Sioned, I apologise. Question 3 is from Georgia Miggins.
Hi, I'm Georgia Miggins, I'm 20. Many people who, like me, have autism and or learning disability leave school with no GCSEs and minimal qualifications. Most jobs require qualifications. We are often not informed of what different pathways and opportunities are available for us to access these qualifications, future job prospects or our dream career. We have goals and aspirations to do with employment that we want to achieve. What are your aims as a Welsh Government to ensure that people like me are given a fair chance to achieve the necessary qualifications, experiences and skills that most employers and jobs require?
Diolch, well said. Thank you, Georgia, for a really important question. First point, many people who, like me, have autism and or learning disability leave school with no GCSEs and minimal qualification. Sioned, can I start with you on this point, please?
Yes, and thank you, diolch, Georgia. And again, Georgia is someone who has worked really hard with the Senedd to inform members here, giving evidence, being a member of the Youth Parliament. You've done a tremendous job, Georgia, so I just want to pay tribute to you personally for the work that you've done raising awareness on these issues. So I agree. So again, we heard evidence when we were doing our committee report on this. And I've also heard people bring this to I chair the cross-party group on learning disability, which is run by Learning Disability Wales. And we've heard time and again about this and the need to be adaptable, to be flexible. Mencap Cymru have highlighted the need to accept lower levels of attainment in maths and English than is normally required to do, for example, an apprenticeship. These have to, if the apprentice has a learning disability or difficulty, and I see that as a completely obvious thing to do. Really, it's really a no-brainer, as they would say. I think that obviously you've got, as Jane was saying earlier, adapting pathways to the person in front of you. Our government very often talks about a person-centred approach, and I think very often that is what is missing. So your question addresses the Welsh Government. Obviously, none of us here are a part of the Welsh Government, but we are the people who hold the Welsh Government to account and ask those types of questions through the work we do in the Senedd and on our committees.
Thank you, Sioned. Sorry to cut you across, but we are very tight for time, I'm afraid. Heaven, can I come on to this point? Part of Georgia's question, well, that's okay, Georgia, was that, as Georgia said, we are often not informed of what different pathways and opportunities are available for us to access qualifications, future job prospects as our dream career. Now, you've highlighted this in your report.
Yes.
Do you want to mention that?
Yeah, recommendation 2. Welsh Government should ensure learners have full clarity on what options are available to them in post-compulsory education at an early stage, allowing them to make viable and informed choices. Learners should also be able to map learning pathways according to their ambition and skills. That was a recommendation I made as recommendation 2, and I'd specifically people with learning disabilities, people with autism in mind, but that should be for everyone. The problem you've got is what often happens in school is the most able learners are directed towards A levels. The rest are kind of educated and then put out into the world to see what happens. And I think that happened when I was in school. Me and Andrea were in school together. It happened then. And I think it's still happening now. What we've got to be better at is thinking about what jobs are out there, what careers are out there, and what choices can learners make at age 12, 13, 14 about the learning pathways that might be available to them. Imagine if you had that information in front of you. Here's 3 different pathways you could go on as a learner, which will lead you into meaningful work. Does that happen now? No? Georgia's shaking her head. Georgia's amazing, by the way, so I'm trusting Georgia on that one. I really do think we need to be better at mapping out those pathways. And I also think that further education colleges, employers,
and universities need access to students earlier as well, and that isn't happening either. And I think that's going to come out of a few reports in the Senate soon. I can see it.
Sorry,
I know
Helen.
you've had the say. I've got to stop.
Sorry, we are really pushed for time. Jane, I want to ask if I could ask you this again on part of George's third point, which was we have goals and aspirations to do with employment that we want to achieve. What are your aims as the Welsh Government to ensure that people like Georgia are given a fair chance to achieve the necessary qualifications, experience and skills that most employers and jobs require?
Well, it goes back to that one-on-one, that individual work, absolutely important. We listen to people. I mean, I happen to know 2 16-year-old twin boys who really need a lot of support, and they are not seen as learning disabled in any way, but they need a lot of support. They've not passed the exams that they were supposed to pass. And it should be the same for everybody, that we are listening, that we are actually looking at the individual needs of that person and really making sure that you don't fit in the whole, but that we create what's needed around that person so that we actually adapt ourselves. Because I'm sure, like my colleagues here, I've learned so much from everybody, but particularly from people who are from different communities that are learning disabled, neurodivergent, autistic. I've learned so much, and that's helped me. So I must, I must carry on doing that. And I'm sure that's a dedication from all of us. We need to listen to you.
Thank you, Jane. Very, very quickly, Mark. 1 minute, exactly. Is there any final quick point you would like to make before we move on?
I'll give a personal example. One of my nephews, aged 11, was still unable to talk in a way that anybody else understood. In fact, he was largely silent. And at age 11, he'd achieved nothing in school. He was very shy, very nervous. His parents got him a place at especially it was actually an independent school in Llandudno, which nonetheless has a lot of pupils funded by local authorities. And because there were small classes, they took the time to get to know him, his strengths, his skills. He left that school 7 years later, articulate, confident, with great skills, which he's now been able to use in the adult world, and he's a father now and a successful young man. So it can be done if you take the time to get it right. And that's what we need. And because if you don't, you'll spend a lot more time dealing with the problems later on.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Question 4. I'm asking this on behalf of my mother and my aunt, who's actually in the room, actually. They are asking the panel, as a family, we know job support was one of the factors of successful employment during Engage to Change. Now Engage to Change project is concluding or finishing. Is there a plan for national job coach support funding to be available in the future? And Heaven, I have to start with you, sorry.
Yeah. Do you know what? I've texted Mark Drakeford. I'm not even joking. Andrea, haven't I? So there's a relatively small amount of funding that could be put forward to Engage to Change or the Legacy Project to carry on doing these things and building on what they've done. I'm fighting for it. Now, as Sean had said, I'm not in Welsh Government, and probably Sean is not likely to be either. So I just think we've got a battle for this, and I wonder, maybe a collective letter from us to push this, maybe the 4 of us should write as a result of today to the Welsh Government and say, we need to be putting money into this job coaching area. Should we do that? I think it would be a good thing to do. Let's push that. That's what you want. Am I right? Yeah. So let's push it. Let's push it together. We'll put a letter together to the Welsh Government and say, job coaching needs work. We need to see what's happening. Now, I know Angela Kenfin is having conversations, but that needs to be out in the open. We need to hear what's going on. What are you doing for job coaching? It doesn't seem to be connected across government because we're not getting the same answers from everyone. We've got to ask these questions, and I'm happy to put a letter together with these brilliant people to try and challenge for that.
Yeah, Kevin. Mark, please. Yeah.
I completely endorse that. I can see a member of your staff at the back who may be charged with drafting that. So smiling now, not looking quite so smiling when you were saying it. But I think it would be very helpful to hear from yourselves directly or through Learning Disability Wales or other organisations. Is there anything else that you would like to be included, things to be done differently? Not just what worked well with the programme, but if there's anything you would like changing or adding to the programme that you would like us to promote as well.
Diolch, Mark. Jane, can I come to you, please?
Yeah, well, there's not much more to add, really. We do need that job coaching strategy to be in place. And really, we need to make sure that this is continuously funded. As Sioned says, Sioned and I know Mark previously and Heaven previously, we've just done an inquiry on what we call the disability employment gap. And it is absolutely unacceptable. Wales has the highest, that's the gap in terms of people who don't have a disability and those who do. The gap in Wales is the highest across all the 4 nations. That's not something we should be willing to accept here in Wales. And I think Heaven's idea of us writing jointly and continuing to lobby the Welsh Government is really important. And we need your help in that. We really do. Let's work together to make sure that happens.
Diolch, Jane. Sioned, may I?
Just very briefly, so this is again something that and Geraint, you gave evidence to our committee on this. The government will have to answer. We discussed the draft report yesterday in committee. It'll be published soon, and then the government will have to answer the points that we make in the report. So we will have an answer from the government around a national job coaching strategy. Yes. So we'll be able to see what they're thinking on this, but certainly, we will continue to lobby, and I know through our various cross-party groups that we'll continue to do that as well. And that's the importance of the cross-party groups too. It does give you a way to be able to write a letter on behalf of people who really know what they're talking about, to say this is the evidence, and then it's very hard for the government to deny that evidence.
I agree. It's pushing that person's voice. And I completely agree with all 4 points. Diolch yn fawr. Question 5 is from Tom Oakes. He's unable to attend this afternoon, but I'm asking it on his behalf. So question 5, Tom Oakes' question is as follows. How are you going to train more job coaches to support adults with learning disabilities and or with autism to gain the confidence and access into the world of work? Mark, can I start with you on this point, please?
Thank you. Well, in part, this is linked, I think, to the last answers you've had and how the Welsh Government responds to the report and the joint letter that we've agreed that we're now going to send. How will the funding be there, and what's the incentive going to be for people to want to take the training to become the coaches? To what extent could peer mentoring support that, but also to what extent could and should the employers themselves be also providing individual coaching support within the workplace to people, or everybody should be having individual performance management and coaching support, whatever their abilities or disability might be. But that should be integrated into any accreditation that any employer receives for providing disability or disability competent employment, not only at devolved level, but the UK government says it's revising its programmes. I think we need to see this incorporated at UK level also.
Diolch, Mark. Can I come to Jane next, if I may?
Well, just really quickly, I'd like to see what I would call a strategy, a workforce strategy, a clear workforce strategy. And within that, I'm a great fan of targets. I want to see targets set for the employment of people with a wide range of disabilities. I think that is really important because at the moment, I don't know what the aspiration is of the Welsh Government in terms of employing people who have learning disabilities and other disabilities. I don't know what they want. I don't know what their vision is. I don't know how they're going to even get there when they do state what that vision is. So I want to see a clear workforce strategy in place that ensures that we have targets in place. And again, that has to be working with yourselves and organisations across Wales to ensure that we get that right. Let's not make it too hefty, though. We just want that quick and easy. Let's just get on with it.
Diolch, Jane. Sioned?
Diolch. Yeah, for me, I think it's about also clarifying expectations. What do we expect? What do we expect should be available? You know, what when we say job coaching, what does that look like? So because we can only ask the government to resource something when we know what it is we want that thing to be. You know, they could resource all kinds of things, but it may not be the right thing. So I think getting a clarity from the government on what people can expect, what kind of support people can expect and what that looks like, and then we can get the resource behind it. I think the thing about confidence is really important here. And for me, this comes back to the social model of disability, because we talk about it an awful lot. And Mark saying about the casework he gets, most of the casework I get from people who are disabled, who have learning disability, who have autism, is that social model doesn't actually exist in reality. You can talk about it all you like, but it's not there. And that's what affects people's confidence, because they see barriers rather than feel that they are part of the world that they are part of. So I think that we need to do more work on that, making the social model a reality in everyday life.
Diolch, Sianed. And finally, Hefin.
I won't add much more, just to say strategy is really important, but we also need to know, is there a labour market there? Are there people out there able to take these jobs up, you know, to be job coaches? And if they are out there, if you're just paying them a living wage, then they might be better off working in Tesco's. So you've got to think carefully about proper pay and structure with that as well, and putting it on a par with nursing, for example. You know, that's the kind of level of job coaches we need. Are the people out there? Can we train them? Can we pay them? 3 key questions we need to answer.
Diolch, Hefin. Right, for time, I'm going to jump to question 7. And it's been asked by Andrew Worsley, Tyler Savory, and Jacob Megan.
We are the admin team. We found paid employment when we engaged a change project at supported internship. After over 5 years of employment, now we need to find new jobs, and our contracts are ending.
So despite our proven skills and value in the workplace, we have struggled to find direct support for transitioning between jobs. Changing jobs is difficult and stressful without support, and the process is complicated. So what could you do to assist us in the process, and how can you make it more accessible to us?
Really good question. Thank you, boys. Big topic. Trying to come about 2 or 3 minutes, if possible. Jane, can I start with you, please?
Oh, thank you very much. Look, for all of us, moving jobs is really, really difficult. But, you know, for particular groups, it's even extra hard. So we've got to have something in place that makes sure that you have the support. This is all about listening and catering to your needs and making sure you have, and we all have, the support that we need. We know that the position of being in a job and then having to leave affects you more than it does the rest of the population, and that's wrong in the first place. You know, you shouldn't be needing to leave a job if you really want to stay in it. And we know that the transition rates for disabled people are much, much higher than they are for non-disabled people. And that's wrong. That is discrimination, to be honest. And that goes back to where I think we all started, which is about a culture change. We need to recognise how valuable and valued everybody is in the workforce. And that's, for me, where we need to go.
Evan, you've actually visited the young people on the internship site in Cardiff University. Do you want to give your opinion on this?
Not only that, I've got to know Andrew, Tyler and Jacob really well over the last year. And I even joined them on their Christmas do when they were at Boom Battle Bar in Cardiff throwing axes. Unfortunately, I'd had a couple of beers on my Christmas do, so I didn't join them with the axe throwing. But I've got to say, these 3 young men, I'm so impressed by. But the reason they've had the opportunity to show their skills is because of Engage to Change. So there's an answer there, isn't there? You know, we need more programs like that. I'm really sorry that your employment's coming to an end. I've tried to fight for more funding for you and it hasn't worked. But, you know, the skills you've got now should stand you in good stead, providing you get that support through applications. Unfortunately, there are a whole load of other people out there who have the same skills but haven't been able to show them. So that's why things like Engage to Change is so important for achieving this. And I know, you know, as I said, I was talking to Andrea yesterday. She's glowing about the work you guys do. You know, you're the A team. Well, there's only 3 of you. You know, you're doing a really, really good job there at Cardiff, and I think you're going to impress whichever employers you apply to. One thing I'd say, I'm dreadful at interviews. I'm not entirely neurotypical myself. I'm dreadful at interviews. So any kind of support with that would be really good. But also getting employers to understand that it's not the interview, it's the person. It's matching those person's skills to the job to that person's skills, and job carving is really important too. Employers need to engage with that. So I'm really confident you guys are going to do well with support, but we also need to work on those people coming up behind you. Particularly, I'm looking at my little Caitlin. You know, she's making her number block figures out of plasticine. She's amazing at it. I wonder, you know, can we get a job for her somewhere around that kind of area in 10 years' time? You know, would that be possible?
Diolch, Kevin. Shanna, we touched upon job carving when we gave all evidence in the Social Justice Committee. Do you want to elaborate on any points that's already been mentioned?
Yes, well, I suppose again for me, there are some wonderful programmes out there. There are some excellent employers. Some people understand the value of job carving, right? But then so many others don't. And this comes back to one of the essential points I think we've talked about in many of our answers this afternoon, is that there just seems to be cliff edges all over the place. There seems to be the support isn't holistic. There are many different types of eligibility criteria, age restrictions, which cut across these things that should all really be knitting together. So I would like to see some of those barriers broken down. And again, I don't think that that's impossible. No. It is to do with resourcing, but it's also to do with culture change and a pan-Wales approach. Because I think we heard very strongly, didn't we, from some places in Wales where some of the firms absolutely get it, and they're giving excellent employment opportunities to people in their local area. Then in others, it's a complete desert. So we need to have a pan-Wales approach to this, I'd say.
I agree. And also as well, picking on those points as well, that there needs to be more easy with application forms as well. I think another touch on this as well. Mark, can I come to you, please?
Thank you. Well, firstly, let me say, given, as you put it, your proven skills and value in the workplace, I'm sorry they're not renewing your contracts. And I'm sure you know this, but the first thing you must ensure you ask for is the references to take to future employers, so that those employers can tell them how good you've been and about your skills. The broader issues, some of these are the responsibility of the UK government, some the Welsh government, and the two need to work together on this. An example was the Work and Health programme, and it was that programme I was giving awards for a few weeks ago, that I mentioned in Wrexham, has come to an end. It's a UK government programme. It didn't work for everybody, but when it worked well for many people. So we need to know if the UK government is going to be replacing that, and when and how that's going to operate, and hopefully how it's going to be designed with you, not for you, so that they understand the barriers you encounter. Similarly, Job Centre Plus, you know, when you lose your job, you have to contact Job Centre Plus. Well, there needs to be people in each Job Centre Plus who have at least, well, more than an awareness training course, who hopefully have lived experience, have a deep understanding of the social model of disability, of the barriers that people encounter, so they can work with you as individuals to identify your barriers, but also the strengths you have to sell to the employers, and then to go out, as the Work and Health programme did, for example, to employers to sell to them the benefits of employing you, of employing disabled people and accessing the skills you have. And finally, I mentioned the UK government's reviews. I'm only reading in the press what's going on. Nobody knows for sure. But there was also reference in something I read over the weekend to the Access to Work programme. Well, at the moment, that's got a big backlog, a time backlog. But despite that, we need it. And we also need it to better incorporate the needs of people with what we call hidden impairments. So it's easier for an employer to recognise a need if somebody's in a wheelchair, for example, than if they look just like anybody else, which
Sorry,
of
Mark,
course
I'll have to
yourselves
stop you
do.
there. We are very tight for time, I'm afraid. Last question from question 8, and this is from Joanna Jones.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Joanna Jones. I'm a member of Always People First, and I work for the NHS, a person with lived experience. I have a question for you today, please. I know there is a lot of support for young people and about transition. But for older people with autism and learning disabilities who want to work, what support is available? We feel like we're forgotten in middle ages.
Thank you, Joanna. And that is right in what you're saying, absolutely, completely. Jane, can I start you off with this point, please?
Yeah, I think it's really important, isn't it? Employment opportunities shouldn't have an age limit. They shouldn't have any restrictions on them at all. We need to make sure that there are opportunities out there. And if we look at all our public sector, they're looking for people to work in the public sector. We have to pay people the right amounts. Absolutely. We have to support people the right amount. But I know that if you do that for anybody, then they will repay that by heaps and heaps and heaps. So that's where we need to start, really, to ensure that people are matched up, that they get paid well, and that we look at where our gaps are and ensure that you get that support.
Thank you, Jane. Heaven?
I'm so sorry, Joanna. I've said the term young people so many times today, and I'm 48 this year, so, I think there's the issue of learning disability and there's the issue of people with neurodiverse conditions like autism, autistic people, I should say. Both of those areas need to be supported, and in exactly the same way as it is for people like Jacob and Andrew and Tyler. I think it's the same thing, the same approach. There is one caveat. Autism is something that we're learning about all the time, and I know that I'm meeting parents of autistic children who are starting to look at themselves and say, maybe this is a genetic thing, maybe this is something that has affected my life as I've grown up. And I've seen that happen multiple times. And I know that there's a parent of a child, a very senior member of my community, who is influential in the community, whose son was diagnosed with autism. And he went for a diagnosis and got it. And it explains an awful lot about him. I think there's a reservoir of people, of people middle-aged and older, who are not diagnosed, who have struggled through life, and who a diagnosis won't solve everything, but it will certainly give them an idea of a pathway forward.
Thank you,
There's
Evan.
a lot of people like that.
Apologies for that.
Sorry, I was slow.
Mark, 1 minute, sorry.
Right.
Same person.
Well, we need to hardwire this into the system. We need to listen to you, work with you to identify, again, the barriers and the solutions we need. We need duties imposed on the public sector and private sector. We need the legislation that we have properly monitored and enforced if necessary, because it isn't, and action taken against those who are in breach. And above all, we need to deal with everybody as an individual, just like everybody else, not label them by their condition or diagnosed conditions, and work with them to achieve what they wish to achieve. And that means listening to them, listening to their parents, carers, families, understanding what their needs are, and stop, for goodness sake, creating further barriers and punishing and blaming them for being who they are.
Thank you, Mark. And finally, Shana, time is very pressing.
Yeah, just very quickly. So, that flexibility thing that we've talked about really all afternoon, about these ridiculous cliff edges and the ridiculous restrictions there are on especially age limits, has come up very strongly in the report, hasn't it? That we've looked at, but I think as well. We need to lead by example. So what the Welsh Government does have power over is the public sector. There are far too few disabled people working in the public sector. I think that, you shouldn't be able to call yourself a disability confident employer unless you can really evidence it. And we know that I think it's only one local authority in Wales currently have that award. That's not good enough. So this is somewhere where we can influence change, lead by example, but employer resistance really has to be tackled. And for me, that's about reporting, mandatory reporting on the disability employment employment gap, because I think that's the way we've started to see it happen as regards gender, as regards, you know, how many women are you employing and what's the difference in their pay scales as regards to your men. Let's do it also for someone else, for another group that are underrepresented and not paid fairly, and that's disabled people.
Diolch, Sianed. That's my job done. Thank you all so much for your answers and questions this afternoon. Just before we depart for networking, I'd like to invite my boss, Angela, to come up and say a few words, please.
I didn't know you can do that, Geraint.
I just did.
You're everybody's boss.
I'll be very, very quick because I know you need to get on. But so absolutely delighted to hear that you're going to write a letter to Welsh Government. I think
help us write it.
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier that, you know, I've been having lots of conversations with them, but unfortunately everything that we've been talking about isn't going to hopefully come to fruition until after we've finished at the end of March. So we're really asking you, you know, to push them with this, because we've been talking to them for quite a number of years now about job coach support being made available through all employability and skills programmes. And we've had some success. We've got supported internships, we've got Jobs Growth Wales Plus, we've got the supported shared apprenticeships, but they're not suitable programmes for everybody. So there are loads and loads of gaps still there. And of course, like you mentioned earlier, it's not Pan Wales either. So we've got some really good programmes, but lots of areas where there's absolutely nothing at all. So please, please, please do what you can. You know, keep on listening to everybody, you know, people with learning disabilities and their families, and people with autism and other groups of people, and working with organisations like Learning Disability Wales to help us push Welsh Government to make Wales a better place for people with learning disabilities and to make it a more inclusive place. So, you know, right through from education to transition to employment and into paid work as well. So thank you very much for today. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and answer our questions. And thank you to everybody in the audience.